You are not here by accident. People who drift through life do not end up here. People who need constant reassurance do not stay. People who are comfortable explaining themselves to everyone rarely pause long enough to listen. If you are here, it is because something in you is already tired of noise, tired of performance, tired of having to prove what should be obvious. You may not have had the language for it yet, but you felt it. That quiet resistance inside you when you're expected to justify your boundaries. That heaviness when you notice yourself explaining things that should not require explanation. That moment of clarity when you realize you are speaking more than you are being heard. This is not weakness. It is awareness waking up. Most people never reach this point. They adapt instead. They soften themselves. They negotiate their values until nothing firm remains. You didn't. And that is why this matters. A Stoic is not someone who withdraws from the world. A Stoic is someone who refuses to be owned by it, refuses to let approval become oxygen, refuses to let misunderstanding become a crisis, refuses to let reaction dictate direction. Stoicism begins the moment you realize that dignity does not need an audience. You don't have to announce who you are. You don't have to clarify yourself to everyone. You don't have to respond to every demand for access. Strength, real strength, is often quiet enough to be mistaken for indifference. And that misunderstanding is not something a Stoic rushes to correct. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from over-explaining. Not physical, not even emotional. It is the exhaustion of self-abandonment. The exhaustion of noticing that the more carefully you choose your words, the less seriously you are taken. The exhaustion of defending intentions to people who only pay attention to outcomes when it suits them. The exhaustion of realizing that your sincerity is being used as leverage against you. If you felt that, you are not broken. You are simply waking up to a truth most people spend their lives avoiding. Not everyone deserves access to you. Not every misunderstanding needs correction. Not every silence needs to be filled. The Stoic understands something essential. Energy is finite. Attention is valuable. And dignity is preserved by restraint, not explanation. A person who knows who they are does not rush to prove it. They move deliberately. They speak when it matters. They remain silent when words would cheapen their position. This is not arrogance. It is economy. The economy of self-respect. You begin to notice this shift when your first instinct stops being reaction and becomes observation. When something happens and instead of responding immediately, you pause. Not because you're afraid, but because you're deciding. That pause, that single moment of restraint, is where Stoicism lives. It is where you stop being pulled and start standing. The world teaches the opposite. It teaches you to respond instantly, to clarify immediately, to explain yourself before silence is mistaken for guilt or weakness. But silence is not absence. Silence is presence without performance. And for those who understand it, it becomes a form of quiet authority. You don't need to raise your voice when your posture is firm. You don't need to argue when your values are consistent. You don't need to chase understanding when your life already reflects your choices. This is not about detaching from people. It is about detaching from the need to be interpreted correctly by everyone. That need is a burden, and most people carry it their entire lives. You don't have to. There is a certain kind of calm that appears when you stop explaining yourself. Not relief, not victory. Clarity. Clarity about who listens. Clarity about who only hears noise. Clarity about where your energy actually belongs. And with that clarity comes a subtle shift. You stop negotiating your worth. You begin to move differently. Speak less. Observe more. Not because you are closed, but because you are selective. This is not retreat. This is alignment. If you've ever felt the urge to pull back instead of pushing harder, to go quiet instead of justifying, to walk away instead of explaining yourself again, this reflection is not here to convince you. It is here to remind you that the instinct you are feeling is not cowardice. It is discipline forming. And discipline, when practiced quietly, becomes power. What follows is not instruction, it is orientation. 8 principles. 8 shifts in how you relate to silence, reaction, and self-command. Not to harden you, but to steady you. Not to isolate you, but to free you. We begin where all Stoic strength begins, with self-governance. Look closely at how most people respond when they feel misunderstood. They don't slow down, they speed up. They reach for words, they send explanations. They replay conversations in their minds, searching for the sentence that might finally land. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack sincerity, but because they've been taught that being misunderstood is a problem that must be fixed immediately. So they explain, then explain again, and then explain what they meant by what they already explained. Notice what happens next. The more they speak, the more scattered they feel. The more they clarify, the less grounded they become. What begins as an attempt at understanding turns into a quiet erosion of self-respect. This is not because explanation is always wrong. It is because explanation, when driven by fear of being misjudged, becomes submission. And most people don't see it happening. They tell themselves they're being mature, that they're being patient, that they're being open. But beneath it, there is something else at work. Dependence. Dependence on being received correctly. Dependence on approval. Dependence on the hope that if they say it just right, they will finally be treated with care. And when that care doesn't come, they try harder. This is how people end up chasing clarity from those who already decided not to give it. You've seen this pattern. You may have lived it. A message goes unanswered, so you send another. A boundary is crossed, so you explain why it hurt. An effort is dismissed, so you justify why it mattered. Each step feels reasonable. Each step feels human. And yet, each step moves you further from your center. There is a quiet humiliation in having to convince someone to take you seriously. Not because you are above them, but because your dignity should never be negotiable. And still, most people negotiate it daily. They bargain with their silence. They trade their calm for a chance to be understood. They don't call it weakness. They call it communication. But communication without mutual respect is not connection. It is exposure. The Stoics observed this long before modern life made it constant. They understood that the more you anchor your peace to someone else's response, the more fragile that peace becomes. Not because others are cruel, but because they are inconsistent. People are distracted, preoccupied, self-focused, and yet we hand them the responsibility for our emotional stability. We wait for replies. We interpret tone. We assign meaning to silence. And without realizing it, we give control away. Here is the uncomfortable truth. The need to explain yourself repeatedly is rarely about clarity. It is about fear. Fear of being seen incorrectly. Fear of being dismissed. Fear of being left with silence. But silence itself is not the threat. The threat is losing yourself while trying to be understood. Think about how much energy is spent trying to control perception. How many hours are lost rehearsing conversations that may never happen? How many boundaries are weakened by the urge to be reasonable? How many instincts are ignored because you didn't want to seem cold? This constant self-editing is not wisdom. It is exhaustion disguised as effort, and it leaves people drained, resentful, and quietly disconnected from themselves. The Stoic response is not to shut down. It is to step back, to recognize that not every situation requires your voice. Not every misunderstanding deserves your explanation. Not every silence needs to be filled. Sometimes the most accurate response is no response at all. Not as punishment, not as manipulation, but as alignment. When you stop rushing to explain, something unexpected happens. You begin to notice how much of your life has been spent reacting instead of choosing. You see how often your words were not invitations, but defenses. You recognize that the calm you were seeking was never going to come from being understood by everyone. It was going to come from standing still within yourself. This realization does not arrive loudly. It settles. And once it settles, your relationship with silence changes. Silence is no longer awkward. It becomes informative. It tells you who respects you enough to meet you halfway. It reveals who only listens when it benefits them. It shows you where your energy has been leaking. This is not about becoming distant. It is about becoming precise, about choosing when to speak and when to let reality speak for you. Because reality, unlike explanation, cannot be argued with. Patterns do not need clarification. Behavior does not need subtitles. And when you learn to trust what you see instead of what you hope to hear, you stop chasing closure from places that cannot provide it. What follows is not a rejection of connection. It is a refinement of it, a way of moving through life without constantly reaching outward for validation, reassurance, or permission. A way of letting silence do the work words were never meant to do. 8 principles follow, not to teach you how to withdraw, but to show you how to remain intact in a world that profits from pulling people apart. We begin now, not with reaction, but with command. 1. Silence is self-governance, not withdrawal. Most people believe silence means stepping back. They imagine it as retreat, as avoidance, as letting something slide. A Stoic understands something very different. Silence, when chosen deliberately, is not withdrawal. It is self-governance. It is the moment you stop being ruled by impulse, emotion, and expectation, and start ruling yourself. To govern yourself means this: you no longer allow the outside world to dictate your inner state. Your mood is not handed over to other people's tone. Your dignity is not placed at the mercy of their reactions. Your peace is not suspended until someone responds the right way. Most people live without this authority. They wake up reactive. They move through the day responding. They fall asleep replaying moments they wish they had handled differently. Not because they are weak, but because they have never learned to pause long enough to choose their response. Self-governance begins with a single discipline: restraint. Restraint is not suppression. It is not denial. It is not emotional numbness. Restraint is awareness combined with choice. It is noticing the surge of emotion and deciding not to obey it immediately. It is feeling the urge to explain, defend, or correct, and choosing stillness instead. This choice changes everything, because the moment you can pause, you regain control. Not over the situation, not over the other person, but over yourself. And that is the only control Stoicism ever promised. Most people mistake reaction for honesty. They believe that if something is felt, it must be expressed. If something is thought, it must be said. If something hurts, it must be addressed immediately. But honesty without discipline is not clarity. It is chaos. A Stoic does not deny emotion. He studies it. He asks, why did this trigger me? Why do I feel the urge to respond? What am I trying to protect? Very often, the answer is not truth, but ego. Not dignity, but fear. Fear of being misread. Fear of being dismissed. Fear of being insignificant. Silence interrupts this fear. When you choose silence, you are not ignoring the situation. You are creating space between stimulus and response. In that space, something important happens. Emotion loses its grip. Perspective returns. Judgment sharpens. You begin to see clearly what actually deserves your energy and what does not. Most conflicts collapse when they are not fed. Most power struggles require your participation. Silence is how you refuse the invitation. This is where many people misunderstand Stoicism. They think it teaches passivity, that it encourages people to accept disrespect or swallow injustice. It does not. Stoicism teaches precision. It teaches you to act from principle, not impulse. There are moments when speech is required, boundaries spoken clearly, decisions stated firmly. But those moments lose their weight when everything is responded to. If you speak at everything, nothing you say carries force. Silence preserves authority. Consider how often people speak out of the need to regain control. They explain themselves to feel grounded. They argue to feel respected. They react to feel powerful. But reaction does not create power. It reveals where power is missing. Self-governance is quiet because it does not need external confirmation. When you govern yourself, you no longer need to prove that you are calm. You simply are. You no longer need to announce boundaries. They are felt in your presence. You no longer need to threaten withdrawal. Your willingness to walk away is already understood. This is not dominance. It is composure. A governed mind does not rush. It recognizes that urgency is often manufactured. Most things do not require an immediate response. They require a correct one. Silence buys you accuracy. It allows you to respond from values instead of wounds, from clarity instead of irritation. This is why silence feels uncomfortable to people who lack self-command. They are used to noise, to emotional feedback, to instant engagement. Silence denies them that leverage, not as punishment, but as consequence. There is a subtle shift that happens when you begin to practice self-governance through silence. You stop feeling responsible for other people's emotions. You stop managing reactions. You stop cushioning truths. You realize their response belongs to them. Your behavior belongs to you. This realization is freeing. It returns responsibility to where it belongs. And when responsibility is properly placed, peace follows naturally. If this idea already resonates, it's worth noticing why. Not everything resonates by accident. Sometimes it resonates because it names something you have already begun practicing, even if unconsciously. Sometimes it resonates because it confirms what you have felt, but not trusted yet. Either way, it signals alignment. Self-governance through silence does not mean disengagement from life. It means engagement on your terms. It means you choose when to invest attention, when to speak, when to withdraw. You stop leaking energy into unnecessary explanations. You stop reacting to provocations that offer nothing in return. Your presence becomes steadier. Your words become fewer. And because of that, they carry more weight. People begin to feel this shift before they can explain it. They sense that access has changed, that reactions are no longer automatic, that engagement is no longer guaranteed. Some respect it, some resist it. Neither reaction requires your correction. A Stoic does not govern others. He governs himself. And in doing so, he naturally reorders his environment. Silence is not the absence of strength. It is strength unspent. It is the discipline of knowing that not every thought needs a voice, not every feeling needs an outlet, and not every situation deserves you. When you master this, you stop living defensively. You stop bracing, stop justifying, stop explaining. You begin to live deliberately. And deliberation is the foundation of Stoic power. This is where the path begins, not with confrontation, not with withdrawal, but with command. Command over impulse, command over emotion, command over yourself. Everything else follows from here. 2. Why explaining yourself weakens authority. There is a quiet instinct most people never question. When they feel misunderstood, they explain. When they feel misjudged, they clarify. When they feel dismissed, they defend. It feels natural, almost responsible. But Stoicism asks a harder question. What if the need to explain yourself is not strength, but insecurity disguised as maturity? Authority does not announce itself. It does not plead its case. It does not repeat itself. It does not chase agreement. Authority is felt, not argued into existence. The moment you feel compelled to justify who you are, what you meant, or why your boundary exists, something subtle has already shifted. You have moved from position to defense, and defense is never neutral. It places you beneath the judgment you are responding to. Most people don't notice this transition. They tell themselves they are being reasonable, that they are clearing misunderstandings, that they are doing the healthy thing. But underneath the explanation, there is often a quiet fear. If I don't explain this, I will be seen incorrectly. And that fear gives power away. Because the moment your peace depends on how you are interpreted, you no longer stand on your own ground. You are negotiating it. A Stoic understands something uncomfortable. You will be misunderstood, no matter how carefully you speak. No explanation is ever complete. No clarification ever reaches everyone. No defense ever satisfies all observers. Trying to control perception is a task without an end, and endless tasks drain authority. When you explain yourself repeatedly, you train people to expect access. Access to your reasoning, access to your emotions, access to your justifications. Over time, this access erodes respect. Not because others are malicious, but because familiarity invites entitlement. When everything is explained, nothing feels final. When every boundary is justified, it begins to look optional. A Stoic does not owe the world a running commentary of his inner life. He does not turn his values into discussion topics. He does not submit his dignity for group approval. He acts. And he allows actions to speak longer than words ever could. This is not secrecy. It is containment. Containment is what gives strength its shape. Think carefully about how often you have explained yourself to someone who had already decided how they felt about you. Did the explanation change them? Or did it simply exhaust you? Most explanations are not ignored. They are absorbed and then dismissed. Because people rarely change their judgment of you based on your words. They change it based on consistency. Consistency does not need explanation. There is a particular kind of confidence that appears when you stop explaining yourself. Not arrogance, not indifference. Stability. You stop reacting to misinterpretation. You stop correcting every assumption. You stop clarifying things that were never asked sincerely. And something interesting happens. Your presence becomes heavier. Your words become rarer. And because of that, they begin to matter. If this feels uncomfortable, that is expected. Explaining yourself has likely been a survival strategy, a way to keep peace, a way to avoid conflict, a way to remain likable. Stoicism does not shame this instinct. It simply asks, is this still serving you? Or is it costing you your sense of authority? Marcus Aurelius warned against this trap without dramatics. He reminded himself not to waste life worrying about how others perceive him, unless it served a meaningful purpose. Most explanations do not. They serve anxiety. They serve fear. They serve the hope of approval. None of these build authority. A Stoic chooses differently. He allows misunderstanding to exist without resistance. Not because he agrees with it, but because he does not need to correct it. He knows that people who matter will observe long enough to understand, and those who don't were never listening anyway. This choice is not passive. It is disciplined. When you stop explaining yourself, you also stop over-investing. You stop over-giving clarity to people who give confusion in return. You stop offering sincerity where it is treated casually. You stop negotiating your worth. This creates space. Space for relationships that do not require constant defense. Space for conversations that begin with respect. Space for silence that does not feel threatening. If this principle resonates, it may be because you have already noticed how explaining yourself has slowly diluted your presence. Not all at once, but over time. Perhaps you noticed how people interrupted more, how boundaries were tested again, how your words were taken less seriously. This is not coincidence. Authority fades when it is over-explained. Silence, in contrast, creates finality. It communicates, this is not open for debate. This is not up for negotiation. This does not require approval. And because it is not spoken, it cannot be argued with. This does not mean you never explain. It means you explain selectively, when clarity serves truth, not fear. When speech builds structure, not reassurance. The Stoic does not abandon language. He masters restraint within it. There is a quiet freedom that arrives when you realize you do not owe everyone access to your reasoning. You do not owe everyone context. You do not owe everyone closure. You owe yourself alignment. And alignment does not require applause. If you find yourself speaking less after hearing this, that is not withdrawal. It is recalibration. And if someone feels unsettled by your silence, that discomfort belongs to them, not you. Authority does not rush to soothe. It stands. As this settles, notice where in your life you have been over-explaining what your behavior already made clear. Those are the places where silence can begin to restore balance. And balance, once restored, does not need to be defended. 3. Silence reveals patterns words conceal. Words are easy. They arrive quickly. They promise clarity. They offer reassurance. But words are also flexible. They bend, they soften, they hide. Patterns do not. A Stoic understands that truth is rarely found in what people say once, or even what they say well. Truth lives in repetition, and repetition becomes visible only when you stop filling the space with words. Most people listen for explanations. A Stoic watches for consistency, because explanations can be crafted. Patterns must be lived. When you speak less, you begin to notice more. Not because others suddenly change, but because noise no longer distracts you. Silence creates a condition most people avoid: exposure. When you stop explaining yourself, you remove the cushion people rely on to stay comfortable in their behavior. There is no clarification to lean on, no emotional labor to absorb tension, no reassurance to reset the dynamic. And so behavior continues uninterrupted. That is when patterns emerge. Notice what happens when you withdraw your commentary. Who reaches out with sincerity? Who becomes impatient? Who disappears entirely? None of these responses require interpretation. They explain themselves. Silence does not provoke truth. It allows truth to continue uninterrupted. This is why silence feels unsettling to many people. Words allow negotiation. Silence does not. Words invite discussion. Silence invites observation. And observation reveals what discussion often hides. A Stoic does not interrogate. He does not accuse. He does not demand explanations. He allows time to speak. Time exposes reliability. Time exposes intention. Time exposes respect. No confrontation required. Many people are surprised by what silence shows them. They expected distance to create reflection. Instead, it created clarity. They realize who only engaged when there was something to gain, who listened only when it was convenient, who valued presence but not personhood. These realizations are not comfortable, but they are honest. Most disappointment does not come from people changing. It comes from finally seeing them clearly. Silence accelerates this clarity. When you stop explaining, you stop participating in illusion. You stop editing reality to make it easier to accept. And reality, when unedited, has a way of speaking plainly. This is where Stoicism differs from emotional coping strategies. It does not aim to soothe you. It aims to steady you. Steadiness requires truth. Truth requires observation. Observation requires silence. Words are often used to rescue people from their own behavior. You explain why something hurt, hoping it will change next time. You clarify expectations, hoping they will be honored. You justify your boundaries, hoping they will be respected. Sometimes this works. Often, it does not. Because respect is not created by explanation, it is revealed by response. A Stoic stops rescuing people from the consequences of their own patterns. Not out of bitterness, not out of punishment, but out of discipline. He understands that clarity is kinder than confusion, and confusion thrives in conversation that goes nowhere. Silence removes excuses. When you are no longer explaining, people cannot hide behind misunderstanding. They cannot claim confusion when expectations were clear. They cannot pretend ignorance when behavior repeats. Patterns become unmistakable. If this principle feels confronting, it may be because silence has already shown you something you have been resisting. Perhaps you noticed someone's effort did not match their words. Perhaps you noticed availability appeared only when you gave more. Perhaps you noticed respect faded when you stopped accommodating. These are not accidents. They are patterns finally visible. A Stoic does not rush to label. He watches. He allows consistency to reveal character. This patience protects him from false conclusions and emotional overreaction. It replaces assumption with evidence. Silence also reveals patterns within yourself. How quickly you rush to explain. How uncomfortable you feel when not responding. How often you assume responsibility for maintaining harmony. These internal patterns matter, because the way you respond to silence reveals where your own discipline is still forming. Stoicism is not only about observing others, it is about observing yourself without distortion. Silence gives you that mirror. It shows you where you still seek approval, where you still fear misunderstanding, where you still confuse explanation with connection. These insights are not meant to shame you. They are meant to refine you. When you begin to trust patterns over promises, something changes in how you relate. You stop chasing reassurance. You stop waiting for clarity that behavior has already denied. You stop reopening conversations that have already been answered through repetition. This saves energy, not the dramatic kind, the sustainable kind. A Stoic values sustainability. He understands that emotional energy must be protected if it is to last. Endless conversation about the same unresolved behavior is a slow drain. Silence ends the cycle, not by force, but by refusal to participate further. This does not mean you never speak. It means you speak after observation, not before. It means your words follow clarity, not hope. When you do speak, you speak with certainty, because certainty comes from evidence. People often ask, how do I know when silence is right? The answer is simple, though not easy. When words have already been given and behavior has not changed, silence is not avoidance. It is recognition. If you find yourself nodding quietly as this settles, you don't need to do anything with it. Awareness is enough. Sometimes the most important shift is simply deciding to watch longer before you speak again. That decision alone changes the direction of your life more than any explanation ever could. Silence does not demand truth. It allows truth to continue until it can no longer be ignored. And when you learn to trust what patterns show you, you stop being surprised by outcomes. You become deliberate. This is not emotional distance. It is emotional accuracy. And accuracy is one of the quiet strengths of a Stoic mind. What you see clearly, you no longer need to debate. What you understand deeply, you no longer need to explain. Silence has done the work. And once that work is done, you move forward, lighter, clearer, and no longer confused by words that never matched reality. 4. Detachment is not coldness, it is precision. Detachment is one of the most misunderstood ideas in Stoicism. Many people hear the word and imagine emotional shutdown, distance, indifference. They think detachment means you stop caring. A Stoic knows this is wrong. Detachment is not the absence of care. It is the discipline of placing care where it actually belongs. Coldness rejects feeling. Precision directs it. The Stoic does not become numb. He becomes selective. Selective with attention. Selective with emotion. Selective with energy. Because everything you give energy to begins to shape you in return. Most people suffer not because they care too much, but because they care everywhere. They pour attention into unstable situations. They invest emotion in unreliable people. They attach significance to reactions that were never meant to carry weight. This scattered care creates exhaustion. Detachment is how the Stoic restores order. Precision begins with a simple recognition. Not everything deserves your response. Not every emotion needs expression. Not every connection deserves maintenance. Not every conflict deserves engagement. This is not avoidance. It is discernment. A Stoic does not detach to escape discomfort. He detaches to prevent distortion. When emotion is unmanaged, it exaggerates. It dramatizes. It pulls meaning from places where none exists. Detachment corrects this. It creates distance between feeling and interpretation. In that distance, clarity returns. Consider how often emotional closeness blurs judgment. You excuse behavior you would never tolerate elsewhere. You justify inconsistency because you hope for potential. You overlook disrespect to preserve connection. These are not acts of kindness. They are acts of self-neglect. Detachment interrupts this pattern, not by severing ties abruptly, but by reassessing investment. The Stoic asks, is this connection stable? Is this dynamic reciprocal? Is this energy returned or only consumed? These questions are not cold, they are responsible. Precision is responsibility applied to emotion. People often resist detachment because they fear what it reveals. They fear discovering that effort was unbalanced, that attachment was one-sided, that loyalty was misplaced. But clarity, even when painful, is less destructive than prolonged illusion. Detachment shortens suffering by ending confusion. If this idea creates discomfort, that discomfort is informative. It may point to areas in your life where emotion has been operating without guidance, where hope has replaced evidence, where familiarity has replaced respect, where attachment has outpaced reality. Detachment does not judge these patterns, it corrects them. Stoicism never taught indifference to people. It taught indifference to chaos. The Stoic cares deeply, but not indiscriminately. He understands that care, when unfiltered, becomes vulnerability without structure. Structure protects what matters. This is why detachment often feels unfamiliar at first. It requires you to pause before reacting emotionally, to observe before investing, to feel without immediately attaching meaning. This restraint can feel unnatural in a world that rewards intensity. But intensity without direction burns quickly. Precision lasts. Detachment also changes how others experience you. When you stop over-investing, your presence becomes calmer, less reactive, more grounded. People sense this. Some respond with respect. Others feel unsettled. Neither response requires explanation. Detachment does not manage perception. It maintains alignment. There is strength in knowing that your emotional state does not rise and fall with every interaction, that you can care without clinging, engage without entanglement. This is emotional maturity, and maturity often appears quiet because it no longer needs to prove itself. The Stoic understands that emotional closeness must be earned repeatedly, not assumed permanently. Detachment keeps this principle intact. It reminds you that access is not entitlement, that familiarity does not override respect, that history does not excuse present behavior. These reminders are not cruel, they are stabilizing. Precision also means knowing when not to detach. Stoicism is not withdrawal from life. It is engagement guided by reason. There are moments that require presence, moments that require empathy, moments that require involvement. Detachment helps you recognize which moments matter and which merely demand attention. Without detachment, everything feels urgent. Every message feels important. Every reaction feels personal. With detachment, priority becomes visible. You begin to see what actually deserves response and what can be allowed to pass without consequence. If this principle resonates, it may be because you are already tired of emotional overextension, tired of managing moods that are not yours, tired of carrying responsibility for dynamics you did not create, tired of mistaking endurance for loyalty. Detachment offers relief, not through escape, but through rebalancing. A Stoic does not abandon compassion. He disciplines it. He understands that compassion without boundaries becomes self-erasure. Detachment restores those boundaries. It allows you to care without losing yourself. This is not a rejection of connection. It is a refinement of it. You begin to value quality over quantity, stability over intensity, consistency over excitement. These values change everything. They reshape relationships. They clarify decisions. They steady the mind. Detachment is not distance from life. It is distance from distortion. It is the choice to see clearly before you feel deeply. And when feeling follows clarity, it becomes strength, not liability. This is Stoic precision, not less heart, but guided heart. Not emotional absence, but emotional intelligence. And once you experience this shift, you no longer fear detachment. You respect it, because it protects what truly matters. 5. Closure is a decision, not a conversation. Most people believe closure is something another person gives them. A final conversation, a clear explanation, an apology that ties everything together. They imagine that if the right words are spoken, the discomfort will dissolve. But Stoicism teaches a harder truth. Closure is not granted, it is claimed. When you wait for someone else to give you peace, you place your healing outside your control. You sit with unfinished conversations. You rehearse what you would say if they ever listened. You hold space for answers that may never come. This waiting feels patient. It feels hopeful. But beneath it, there is quiet dependency. The Stoic does not deny the desire for closure. He understands it. The mind wants resolution. The heart wants meaning. The ego wants to be understood. But wanting closure does not mean chasing it is wise. Very often, the people you want answers from are the least capable of giving them. Not because they are cruel, but because they lack clarity themselves. When someone avoids accountability, no explanation will satisfy. When someone lacks self-awareness, no conversation will bring peace. When someone has already moved on, no dialogue will reopen sincerity. Yet people keep trying. They explain their pain. They describe their intentions. They wait for recognition. And each attempt reopens the wound. This is where Stoicism intervenes. It asks, what if closure does not come from understanding them, but from understanding yourself? What if peace arrives not when they finally speak, but when you decide you no longer need them to? Closure, in the Stoic sense, is the moment you stop negotiating with the past. You stop hoping for a different response. You stop revisiting the same memory in search of a new outcome. You stop placing your calm on hold. This decision is quiet. There is no announcement, no final message, no dramatic exit. Just acceptance. Acceptance does not mean approval. It means recognition. You recognize what happened. You recognize what did not happen. You recognize what was missing. And you stop asking the past to correct itself. Many people resist this idea because it feels unfair. They think, why should I be the one to let go when I was the one hurt? But Stoicism does not ask what is fair. It asks what is within your control. You cannot control whether someone explains themselves. You cannot control whether someone apologizes sincerely. You cannot control whether someone understands your pain. But you can control how long you keep bleeding from the same wound. Chasing closure often keeps people emotionally tethered to those who have already left. They replay conversations. They interpret silence. They assign meaning to absence. This attachment feels like processing. In reality, it is stagnation. Closure breaks this attachment, not through force, but through resolve. The Stoic understands that some endings do not come with clarity. Some relationships end quietly. Some betrayals are never explained. Some losses remain ambiguous. This ambiguity is not a failure. It is a condition of life. Trying to eliminate it completely leads to endless frustration. Learning to live with it leads to freedom. Epictetus reminded his students that suffering often comes not from events, but from our insistence that reality should have unfolded differently. Closure is the moment you stop insisting. If this principle resonates, it may be because you are tired of reopening doors that never truly closed. Tired of wondering what you did wrong. Tired of waiting for words that never arrive. This fatigue is not weakness. It is the signal that you are ready to reclaim authorship over your emotional life. Closure does not require understanding. It requires honesty. Honesty about what was given. Honesty about what was withheld. Honesty about what you tolerated longer than you should have. This honesty is not cruel. It is corrective. When you choose closure, you also choose boundaries. You stop seeking validation from the source of the wound. You stop explaining your pain to those who dismissed it. You stop reopening dialogue with people who have already shown their limits. This is not bitterness. It is self-respect returning. There is relief in realizing you do not need one more conversation to move forward. You do not need agreement. You do not need confession. You do not need closure to look like closure. You need decision. And decision, once made, ends the cycle. This does not erase memory. It reframes it. You remember without longing. You recall without reopening. You acknowledge without attachment. This is emotional maturity. The Stoic does not erase the past. He places it where it belongs, behind him. Not because it no longer matters, but because it no longer governs. If you find yourself feeling calmer as this settles, that calm is not coincidence. It is the relief of releasing responsibility that was never yours to carry. Closure was never something someone else owed you. It was something you were meant to give yourself. Once that decision is made, your energy returns. Your attention moves forward. Your mind quiets. Not because everything was explained, but because everything no longer needs to be. That is Stoic closure. Not dramatic, not loud. Final. 6. Silence teaches what confrontation never can. Most people believe that problems are solved by confrontation. They believe clarity comes from saying everything, that respect is earned by standing your ground loudly, that lessons are learned through forceful conversation. This belief feels intuitive, but it is often wrong. A Stoic understands something that experience teaches slowly. Most people do not change because they are confronted. They change when they are left alone with the consequences of their behavior. Confrontation creates resistance. The moment you confront, defenses rise, egos activate, positions harden. People listen, not to understand, but to respond. They prepare counterarguments, they justify, they protect their self-image. Very little learning happens here. Silence does something different. It removes the stage. There is no debate, no emotional charge to push against, no argument to win, just space. And in that space, something important happens. People are forced to sit with themselves. When you stop explaining, stop correcting, stop demanding acknowledgement, others are left with only one thing: their own actions. They replay moments. They notice absence. They feel the weight of what is no longer available. This discomfort is not something you create. It is something they encounter. A Stoic does not seek to teach lessons. He understands that lessons cannot be forced. They must be discovered. Silence allows discovery. Consider how often confrontation keeps people trapped in the same cycle. You express how something hurt. They deflect. You clarify. They minimize. You explain again. They grow defensive. The conversation ends exactly where it began, except now you are more drained. Silence ends the cycle without escalation, not because it wins, but because it refuses to play. This is not avoidance. Avoidance hides. Silence reveals. Avoidance suppresses truth. Silence exposes it. When you confront someone, you give them your energy. You give them something to push against, something to reinterpret, something to dismiss. When you remain silent, you give them nothing, except reality. Reality is harder to escape. People often say, "But if I don't say something, they won't know they were wrong." This assumes people are unaware. Most of the time, they already know. What What they lack is consequence. Confrontation delays consequence. Silence delivers it. Distance changes perspective. When someone no longer has access to you, they are forced to examine what that access provided. Stability, support, consistency, presence, or perhaps nothing they valued at all. Either realization is instructive. A Stoic allows this process to unfold without interference. He does not interrupt learning by re-entering the dynamic too quickly. He understands that absence, when consistent, communicates more clearly than any explanation ever could. This is why silence feels powerful, not because it punishes, but because it respects reality. It allows outcomes to speak for themselves, and outcomes do not argue. There is also a lesson silence teaches you. It shows you how often you have tried to manage other people's growth, how often you have tried to explain someone into maturity, how often you have tried to reason someone into respect. This effort feels noble, but it is misplaced. Growth cannot be outsourced. Awareness cannot be forced. Silence corrects this impulse. When you stop confronting, you stop taking responsibility for lessons that were never yours to teach. This frees you. It returns energy that was being spent on resistance. If this principle resonates, it may be because you are tired of repeating yourself, tired of conversations that circle endlessly, tired of explanations that change nothing. This fatigue is not failure. It is information. It tells you that a different approach is required. The Stoic approach is simple, though not easy. Step back. Remain consistent. Allow time to work. Time, combined with silence, is one of the most effective teachers there is. This does not mean you never speak up. It means you recognize when speaking has already been done, when boundaries were already stated, when expectations were already clear, when respect was already requested. At that point, more words dilute meaning. Silence preserves it. People often learn more from what you no longer tolerate than from what you explain. They notice what you withdraw. They feel what you no longer offer. They observe where access ends. These observations reshape understanding. Silence also protects you from becoming hardened. Confrontation often leaves residue, anger, resentment, regret. Silence leaves clarity. You walk away without emotional debris, without needing to prove that you were right. Rightness is irrelevant. Alignment is everything. A Stoic measures success not by who was corrected, but by who he became through restraint. Silence strengthens patience. Distance strengthens judgment. Time strengthens perspective. These qualities outlast any argument. If you allow silence to do its work, you will notice something quietly powerful. People either adjust or they drift away. Both outcomes restore balance. You do not need to announce that you are stepping back. You do not need to explain why you are no longer engaging. The absence itself communicates enough. And if someone never learns, that lesson was never meant for them. It was meant for you, to show you where your energy truly belongs. Silence does not shout. It does not accuse. It does not argue. It teaches, without saying a word. And what is learned this way is rarely forgotten. 7. Your absence resets the power dynamic. Power is rarely taken. It is usually given. Given through access, through availability, through tolerance. Most people never notice how much power they hand over, simply by remaining accessible, no matter how they are treated. A Stoic notices. Every relationship contains a dynamic, not spoken, not negotiated, but felt. Who initiates? Who adapts? Who accommodates? who waits. These patterns form quietly over time, and once formed, they shape how respect flows. When you are always available, your presence becomes expected. When you always respond, your attention becomes assumed. When you tolerate too much, your boundaries become invisible. This is not because others are malicious. It is because consistency creates precedent. A Stoic understands this. Access without standards erodes leverage. Not leverage for control, but leverage for balance. Balance is what keeps relationships healthy. Absence interrupts imbalance. Not dramatically, not aggressively, simply by existing. When you stop being constantly available, something changes. People feel the difference before they understand it. The rhythm shifts. The expectation breaks. The dynamic pauses. Your absence is not punishment. It is information. It communicates. Access is not guaranteed. Engagement is not automatic. Respect has conditions. None of this needs to be said aloud. Silence carries it naturally. Most people are uncomfortable when access changes. They ask questions. They seek reassurance. They test boundaries. Not because they suddenly care, but because the familiar structure has been disturbed. A Stoic does not rush to stabilize that discomfort. He allows the new dynamic to reveal itself. Some people respond with respect. They adjust. They meet you with more intention. They engage with greater care. Others respond with irritation. They accuse. They withdraw. They attempt to provoke a reaction. Both responses are instructive. Absence clarifies intention. Those who value you will adapt. Those who valued access will resist. Neither outcome requires explanation. This is where many people falter. They feel the tension and rush to repair it. They reassure. They explain. They soften boundaries. In doing so, they undo the reset. The Stoic resists this impulse. He understands that discomfort is part of recalibration. Power dynamics do not correct themselves through conversation alone. They correct themselves through consistent behavior. Absence is behavior. This does not mean withdrawing as a tactic. Stoicism does not teach manipulation. Absence is not used to elicit guilt, not to provoke longing, not to control response. It is used to restore alignment. When you step back because something feels misaligned, you are not playing a game. You are honoring perception. Ignoring that perception is how imbalance grows. A Stoic trusts his perception. He does not need permission to create distance. He does not need agreement to withdraw access. He understands that how he is treated is more important than how he is perceived. If this principle resonates, it may be because you have felt how draining constant availability can be. Felt how expectation replaces appreciation, how presence becomes invisible, how effort goes unnoticed. These feelings are not imagined. They are signals. Absence sharpens contrast. When you are no longer there, people notice what you carried, or they don't. Both outcomes restore truth. This truth is not always flattering. Sometimes absence reveals that you were valued less than you believed. This realization can sting, but it is better than illusion. Stoicism values truth over comfort. Comfort fades. Truth stabilizes. Absence provides that stability. There is a quiet confidence in knowing you can step back without explanation, that your life does not collapse when you are not constantly present, that your value does not depend on continuous availability. This confidence changes posture. You move differently, speak differently, respond differently, because you are no longer negotiating for position. You are standing in it. People sense this shift. Some respect it immediately, Others never adjust. Neither response defines you. Your alignment does. A Stoic does not chase balance. He creates it. Through boundaries, through restraint, through selective presence. Absence is one of those tools, not to dominate, but to stabilize. When you allow absence to reset the dynamic, you reclaim choice. Choice over engagement, choice over investment, choice over energy. This choice restores power to where it belongs, not in controlling others, but in governing yourself. And once power is internal, external dynamics lose their grip. You are no longer pulled by expectation, no longer pressured by availability, no longer defined by constant presence. Absence teaches one final lesson. You are not required to remain where you are not valued. You do not owe continuous access to anyone. Your presence is not free, and when you treat it that way, others either rise to meet you or fall away. Both outcomes restore balance. That is the quiet recalibration absence provides. Not drama, not declaration, just truth, revealed through space. 8. Silence builds a reputation you don't have to defend. In the long run, words fade. Explanations are forgotten. Arguments dissolve. Justifications blur. What remains is reputation. Not the one you try to manage, but the one your behavior quietly builds. A Stoic understands this early. Reputation is not created through persuasion. It is formed through consistency. Most people spend years trying to control how they are seen. They explain themselves preemptively. They correct misunderstandings immediately. They rush to protect their image. In doing so, they reveal uncertainty, because the need to defend a reputation usually means it is not yet stable. Silence works differently. Silence allows time to do its work. When you stop reacting, stop justifying, stop clarifying every detail, people are left with only one reference point: your actions. And actions, repeated over time, create a reputation that does not require explanation. A Stoic is not in a hurry to be understood. He is patient enough to be known. Known through restraint. Known through composure. Known through how he handles pressure without spectacle. This kind of reputation cannot be argued with. People may misunderstand you in the moment. They may project. They may assume. But over time, patterns override assumptions. Consistency outlives opinion. When you do not rush to defend yourself, you signal confidence. Not confidence in being right, but confidence in alignment. You trust that what you stand for will become clear without your interference. This trust is rare, and because it is rare, it carries weight. If this principle resonates, it may be because you are tired of explaining who you are, tired of correcting narratives, tired of clarifying intentions, tired of feeling like your character is always on trial. Silence offers relief, not by hiding, but by standing still long enough for truth to settle. A reputation built on silence does not mean secrecy. It means discretion. You stop offering access to your inner life indiscriminately. You stop turning every decision into a public discussion. You stop defending choices that are already aligned with your values. This restraint sharpens identity. Over time, people notice something. You are consistent. You do not overreact. You do not explain yourself into circles. You do not chase approval. This steadiness becomes associated with you, and association becomes expectation. When your reputation is built this way, you no longer need to manage perception. Misunderstandings resolve themselves. False narratives collapse under time. Noise fades. because stability is louder than defense. This does not mean everyone will like you. Stoicism never promised that. It means the people who matter will trust you, and the people who don't will lose relevance. That is not arrogance, it is clarity. A Stoic does not aim to be impressive. He aims to be reliable. Reliable in character, reliable in restraint, reliable in principle. Silence protects this reliability. It keeps you from saying things you don't need to say, from reacting in ways you later have to explain, from diluting your presence with unnecessary words. When you let silence build your reputation, you step out of urgency. You stop rushing to be seen correctly. You stop fearing temporary misunderstanding. You stop trading long-term respect for short-term relief. This shift changes how you move. In time, you realize something quietly powerful. You no longer need to defend who you are. Your life already has. That is the final strength of silence. Not isolation, not distance. Legacy, built slowly, maintained quietly, and strong enough to stand without explanation. By now you can feel the shift. Not excitement, not urgency, clarity. The kind that settles instead of stirs. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. The kind that remains when noise fades. You've seen that silence is not weakness, not avoidance, not emotional absence. It is structure. It is the discipline of choosing where your energy goes and where it no longer belongs. A Stoic does not measure strength by how much he says, but by how much he no longer needs to. He does not chase understanding. He does not beg for recognition. He does not explain what his behavior has already made clear. He governs himself. And that governance creates a life that does not require constant defense. Silence is not about disappearing. It is about standing so firmly that reaction becomes unnecessary. It is about knowing when to speak and trusting yourself enough to remain quiet when words would only dilute truth. This is not coldness. It is clarity. Not detachment from people, but detachment from chaos. As you carry this forward, you may notice something change. You may speak less, respond slower, observe longer. Let that happen. There is nothing to correct. You are not becoming distant. You are becoming deliberate. And if at any point you notice yourself wanting to return to old habits, over-explaining, over-giving, over-accommodating, pause. That pause is the practice. If this reflection helped you steady something internal, you don't need to announce it. But you may want to stay close to this way of thinking. Not for motivation, not for reassurance, but for alignment. This space exists for those who choose restraint over reaction, clarity over noise, and self-command over approval. And if someone you care about is still exhausting themselves trying to be understood where silence would protect them, this reflection may meet them where words cannot. You don't need to say more. Let silence do the rest. That is the standard. And once you live by it, you will never need to explain yourself again.